Good morning, everybody. Just welcome to our webinar on Nimbus reports. My name is Blair and I'm from Nimbus. And this webinar is more reporting because if you tuned in last week, we actually we did partake in this webinar, and we wanted to do a part two just to continue on and just to get this finished for everybody. And thank you for coming back and joining if you were here last week. Okay, so let's carry on. So the objective is basically, as I've said last week, is that an ERP system is all about information. So information is about how you put information into your ERP system and how you get your information out. So how you get in, whether it's by importing or by keying or some other method of capturing that information. And by getting it out is about reporting. It's about how you actually list that information. It's about how you can see that information and how perhaps you don't have to manipulate it. You can use workflow to go on to the very next step in your reports. And that's why we're doing these webinars on reporting, to sort of show you what the capabilities are and what it can do and how it's actually working. So you can actually help customize or to get the workflow even better in your Nimbus system. So top-down agenda from last week, just doing this really quickly, just to what we covered. So if you haven't seen the recording from last week, it will be made available and you will be able to go through and have a look at this. So we look at the top of a web report, and that we have what we term as header reports. And we looked at how we could add additional fields to these header reports and how we can also change the column width so they can go 4 columns across instead of 2 columns or something like that. So we looked at how that could be changed. We also looked about how header links actually work. So a header link is basically a link to something else. So it can be another part of the Nimbus system, another application, another URL, a website, a form that just pops up that has a field in it that you populate that does something to update your existing form or move you on to what's perhaps the next step in your workflow. Then we looked at printing, exporting, and filtering. So from that, we looked at how you can, when you print or when you export, that we had a couple of options there, that they were from you could an internal option or a client option, and how in web reports you could set within the report itself what a client gets to see. So when you either print or export it, some of the columns may not be visible that you don't want the customer to see. We also looked at, from a filtering perspective, how you can use those clear sort or clear filters or save report settings to format the screen in the way that it looks for you, move columns around, apply some filtering and save those report settings so that they're applicable to you. We also looked at and when we added extra fields or we actually updated the screen, is how you can then see if the column was actually added and if you'd already saved your report settings. And we had an option there against how you could actually reset anybody that had saved report settings. So one of the questions from last week was the fact that if I'd had saved report settings, I had my format the way that I want it, my columns laid out, my filtering the way that I want it, and a new field was added to that report, would I get to see that? And the answer, of course, is yes, you can certainly see that. But the other option is that we can also reset it for everybody in totality, so they get to see it laid out the way that you've got it configured and set. So you could roll that out for the entire organization. So this week, we want to cover rows, data, links, and colors, column colors. We want to talk about page totals and report totals. We want to talk about grid styles and column sizing. We want to then looking at all these things, and if we make changes to our own reports, and realizing that changing our own reports, we always recommend that you use a test system. So you back up and restore your existing site to a test system. And then we want to look at the fact about how do we actually export our reports if we've made changes, and how do we import them back into our live system without having to rekey or to change everything again. And then right at the very end, we want to be able to have some questions from what I've discussed today. Now, also, a big part about what happened last week was that there's a lot of questions around colors in reports and how do we use coloring and how do we display things, which is actually, it is a great question, because once again, information is about laying it out the way that you want to see it, but also bringing your attention, your eye to something that perhaps you want to know more about or that you need to highlight. So we're going to do a lot about coloring and how colors are actually set in web reports. So because you can go back once this is actually recorded and once it actually is put back up for you to have a look at, you'll be able to go back and have a look at the screen. And I've put some text up here just because when I'm demonstrating this, some of these formulas may be hard to see. So I just wanted to make sure that it was clear. You could go back, pause this, have a look at it and see what some of these formulas were in relating to colors. I've also got their URL for a website, this theodora.com, about colors. So if you see here where I've got in this format column here, it says if supervisor equals staff, make it this color. This color is like sort of a hexadecimal sort of type color. And how do you know what those colors actually are? So that website actually has a list what all those colors are, so you don't have to kind of guess. And I'll show you throughout the system how we've got it set up so that you can actually also know what those colors are. So talking about colors, we have in the formatting, we have if, so this sets the cell color, if C, so that sets the cell background, and if R sets the whole entire row to that particular color. Now, also, if we're using a field that exists from something else, what we term a view, or the way the data is being presented, we can do a particular format. It looks a bit strange. It says if A equals A, which really just means if it's true. If whatever A is always going to be true, so it says I'm going to do this particular field has this color in it, and otherwise I'm going to make it normal. And then we're also going to look at some other reports as well, where we can see that in this in numbers. So if you have a whole list of numbers or transactions on the screen, you can do formatting. So if it's a negative, it can be a red color, or if it's a positive, a green color, etc. And you can add your formatting of your dollar signs and that sort of thing to it as well. So we're going to sort of cover that off in depth as part of our discussions today. All right, so if I make a start, if we talk about from rows and about where, actually what I wanted to do, just what I just remembered is from last week, I did actually mention something else which I thought was really neat. And I wanted to make sure that people were aware of it. So what I'm going to talk about here is about, here we are, my job list screen. If you notice from last week, I've made a few colors on it. I've made it a little bit more presentable for my example. So last week I had an example where I said you could do all your filtering that you want on the screen, save it, and you keep it for yourself. What I also said is that in my menu here, I have another, on the left-hand side, I've got a job list internal. If I click on that, what that also does is from the menu, it applies filters to my report. Oh, that's always fun, isn't it? This is what Murphy Law is all about when you demonstrate. If you click on something and it takes a little while for it to actually come up on your screen, I wonder what that's actually doing. Let me just stop that and try that again. Oh, there we go. It must have been waking up a little bit. So what I've just done here is I've launched job list internal, and that has a couple of filters applied. What the filter was, it filtered the client to internal, and it filtered the supervisor to Adam. So this is a real easy way that you can have multiple versions of the same report with these different filters on them, so you can go to it quickly and easily without having to add additional information to filter at the time. And of course, because it's part of the menu structure, these menu items, job list or job list internal, etc., can be all related to a particular individual. So you can put security around who can actually see those with your user groups or not. And I just wanted to show you from this menu editing how easy that is to do. So if I just pull this up here, what I just have here is I go to my menu editing screen, and in my menu editing screen I have my under my inquiry I have my job list internal, and if I click on that, it'll pop up a wee screen, and what it says here is that my job list internal is basically running a report, and I actually just made it to open it in a new browser. My report's called job list, and down the bottom here what I'm saying is that I'm saying what are the parameters or what are the filters that I'm passing into it. So i.e. debtor index equals internal and supervisor equals Adam. So on that screen you can see that there was a debtor index, and that was internal, and that was a supervisor, and that was called Adam. That brings up just one point that I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of, is that in relation to where I had this menu, that debtor index says here, debtor index, which is actually the field name, and on the report it's been renamed to client. So it's just one thing that you just need to be aware of. And how do we know that? We can see that by if we go to the web report admin, and on the web report admin, you can click on the columns that's showing here. So under my job list, I click on the columns and it tells me that here's a list of the columns, and under my what column name, so column name is what you see in the report, and it shows me that it's called debtor index in this example. So it's just knowing where the translation is there. So it's looking for debtor index rather than client, which is what's visible on the report itself. Okay. Now, what I want to have a look at is, if I just close some of these things down, what I want to have a look at. So, okay, so here we are on my job list report. So data, where's my data coming from? Well, my data can come from anywhere that I want it to come from. This is basically a list of data, which is a job list screen. And we have what's termed in the system as views, so views of information. So it's just data, and it can be from anywhere in your system. As long as it's been keyed in, we can report upon it. So it can be calculations of numbers or anything like that. So basically, whatever you want, these reports can actually be or become. So it's possible for you to create these yourself, or it's possible, of course, to ask one of your Nimbus consultants. They're all very skilled in how to write these reports. So on the screen, you can see that I've got a number of fields and a number of colors that are relating to that. Now, I just want to go back into just talk about that view just one little bit longer. If I just duplicate this tab, I'm just going to go into my web reports. And I'm just going to look for my job list. So my job list here, so here's my job list report. It's saying that the view, or where the data is coming from, is this view called U job list. Now, I did mention last week as well, and I'll just talk a little bit more about this because it's useful to have, is that we have an area in the system that's called View Maker. And View Maker lets us have a look at what those views are. So this U job list, I can click on that to be able to edit it or to do something with it. And if I'm clicking on that, I can see once it opens, I can see that once it opens, it gives me a list of what that gives me that existing view. I can go next on this one. Now, if you ever do this and it comes up with a message like this, it says that it means that the view's been edited in some shape or form within something called the SQL Management Studio. So it's not actually to be editable from this. And just to show you what that one actually looks like, which is a little bit more complex than the average, I'll drag and drop that up here. And if you have those messages, here's perhaps a reason why you want your Nimbus consultant actually to have a look at or make a change to this view, i.e. add an extra field or to do some sort of change to it. Some of these can be a little bit more complicated, and some of these can have all sorts of calculations and things in them. And I'll just point out over here that I added a couple of fields to this one to do with the color. So I've added a color onto the debtor field itself, and I also pulled through a color from JS, which is the job status table. So I pulled through the color from there as well to give you an example. But I just wanted to show that if you can't edit it in that screen, there's a reason for it. It's been made a little bit more complex in the SQL Management Studio, and perhaps your Nimbus consultant is a person who can add an extra field or do something to that on your behalf. Otherwise, if it was one that was easy to edit, so if I just have a look for a job type as an example, job types, job types, job types. And I open that up and I go next. It asks me for the next step. I can go next. It comes up with the list of the fields that are already on there, and I can click on here and go add field and add additional information to it. So it's as easy as that. It's basically adding a field, choosing something else that you wanted to show, which will add it to the screen, and then you can just go next and finish, and it'll add it to the field, so it's actually visible, so you can actually add it to your report that you're in. Didn't add anything to that one, so I'll just cancel that. So what that means is that then if I'd added it to my screen, if I go now into, say, an example was my job list, I open that one. Is that if I'd added that field in where it's got column selection, it'll be now something on the left-hand side that'll be available for me to select, and just basically select whatever that field was and move it across to the right-hand side. And then that makes it available as a column in my column properties, so I can do something with it. So, okay, so let's explore a little bit further this job list that I've done and some of the functionality of this screen. So in this job list, you can see that I have a number of columns which have different colors on them. So I've got columns that have particular colors. I have rows that have particular colors. So you can see across here I have, I've attached to, if the invoice queue is no charge, I wanted to change the line slightly. So I wanted to make it gray so it was just slightly more visible to my eye so I could see it. So how did I do that? What I did in my report is I, right here, this is another reason why I gave you those formulas earlier on. If it's too hard to see, you might want to blow that up a little bit or have a look at a later time. But I'm saying here, if the invoice queue equals no charge, I want to make the color something like light gray, otherwise it's going to be normal. So the field invoice queue, which, remember, it's the field name itself, it's not the column label. Invoice queue is in square brackets, and in front of it is an if R. So the if R means it is going to change the row to be in a gray color. So a lot of those colors you can actually key in. So you can say light gray or black or red or orange or that sort of thing. You can also, if you want to know what some of these hexadecimal sort of type numbering numbers are, we also have in the system, there is a screen called color list. If you have a look at the color list, it shows you a list of the different colors, and it shows you the hex color. It'll also show you, what does it actually look like. So you can know if I wanted a kind of a greeny color, it would look like this, or a reddy color, it would be this sort of type number here as well. So that's where you can also grab some of those numbers from, or that website that I mentioned earlier on. Now, just to take this a step further in Nimbus, just from a color perspective, what we also have is color scales. So what does this mean? So color scales means that we can have, based on results. So here's a scale that's on days to go. If the display, if it's got 1 day to go or 2 days to go or 4 days to go or 5 days to go, it becomes a different color. And we can use scales like that, and we can get the screen to be clever enough to actually pick that up and do something with it. So an example of this screen that uses color scales is the example of that screen is jobs to issue. So if I open up the jobs to issue screen, you can see here in this days to go that it's actually that's using that scale that I showed over here on the scale report. So under days to go, it's showing if it has 1 day to go, it is using the display value here of 1. So it uses that particular color. If it's got 3 days to go, it's using this color here, because it's between 2 and 4 days. So 3 days to go, it's using this color. So we can get quite clever with how it actually uses colors in the system, other than just using a particular color that I showed you before and saying it relates to, in this case, it relates to the invoice queue, and if it equals no charge, it becomes light gray. Another example of that is I've got a field here, it's the debtor color, and I'm saying I've got a field and it's saying if it's the debtor color, so it's the debtor color that it gets from the view, it's making it that color. So how does that work? Let me show you. So what I've done here, if I go back to my job list report, what I've done is I have against debtor, Just to show you the power of this, what we can do with the Nimbus, and I'm sure you're probably quite aware of this, I added an extra field to the data form. I called it data color. So for this internal color, I've used a little selector so I can change whatever the color is. So I can say in the case of my internal, I want to make that some sort of a greeny color. And if I OK that, it'll change the color of that internal customer to that particular greeny color that we're on. So how did I do that? So I added an extra field to the data screen. That extra field contained the color, and then that color from the data screen was added to the view of the report. And then basically the report said, if I can see the color in that screen, in that field that's been added, I'm going to use it. And I just put the hexadecimal number in here just as an example so we could see what that looks like. Now, I just also wanted to be able to demonstrate as well, as part of that, you saw that I changed that by clicking, opening up the data screen, changing the color and bringing that back. Obviously within Nimbus, all these fields, you can click on them, they go to different places depending how they're set up. The tool link will tell you where it's actually heading to, link to the project manager or something like that. I can open up another one of these ones like auto electrical. So what I've done here, just to sort of demonstrate, I've actually created just a quick form that basically says, okay, you've opened up auto electrical, what do you want to do? You want to change the color. So I want to change this color to being something else. So instead of being, in the case of what it is now, which is yellow, I want to make it red. If I go okay, it'll go back and automatically update the data record, change the color there, and also refresh this report and repopulate the color. So there's all lots of sorts of, and this is just a way of just highlighting how clever this actually is. You know, click on a field, a form will pop up, make a change, which could be running a process, it could be updating some data that's there, it could be doing any sort of thing that you want. Clicking OK, goes back, refreshes the report, it's up to date, and it's ready to go right there and then. Wanted to show you another field that's on here as well. So another field that we have is this one that's called the status field. So the status field is the job status, and I want to show you if I go to what's termed as code tables. So in code tables, we will have the job status table. I think why my system's going a little bit slow, I've got all these sitting down the bottom of my screen that I just drag up and make changes to, and it takes a little while for it to sort of think about what I'm doing. So, okay, here we are. So if we go into, if I just type in types, or actually, what was it? Job status, wasn't it? Can I spell? Okay, against that table, you can see over here, this is actually a lot of what we term as these code tables, or it actually also has a color off to the right-hand side. So in my report, you can see here that a lot of these statuses have colors to them already. And I could go, okay, my XQT job status, I don't have a code assigned to that. I can go to my XCT. Now let's just see, that's what I was talking about, wasn't it? Sorry, XQT. And I can change the color. And I can say in the case of that one, let's make that a greeny color. Okay. So come back to my report, refresh my report. And now it's updated to being a greeny color. So I wanted to show you that you can create colors in this report by coding them directly into the report that we had as that example against the invoice queue, by coding it directly into the report, or the fact that we can then dynamically, as an example that's here, we can have that code table for the job status, we can change the color, and what it's doing dynamically here is going back and saying, I can see that job status color is actually changed. I'm now going to make that column equal to being that particular color. Okay. Now, um, also, let's just see. Okay. So what I want to talk about now, so we've talked a little about colors. We've talked about how we can actually alter those by updating that format column. I just also wanted to have a look at another screen, which is having a look at the colors to do with numbers. So if I look for my MB project claim report. Okay, so you can see in this one, what I've done here is I've applied the color sequences of, if it's greater than 0, I'm going to make it green. So this is the field on the right-hand side that is the remaining value. But if for whatever reason it's negative, I want to highlight it and make it red or to stand out on the screen. So if I just show you, I'll just get that. This is the project claim report. So if I just go into my Nimbus web reporter tool, project claim, you can see here that in my format column, I have added the formula that I showed earlier on when we first started the presentation. So green and red if it's a negative figure in the report. So I could change that to be in other different colors if I wanted to change that. But it's very easy to format even numbers in there to make it just highlight in the report a little bit better, as to bring the eye to perhaps what shouldn't be a negative figure on a report. Okay, great. Now, the other one that I just wanted to show is that we talked about, here's a column color, here's a row color, there's also a color of the field itself. Now I'm just going to change this job list one. I'm just going to go and bring that up, just to give you an example of what that actually looks like. So in the job list, I had against the data color, I had it a column. So FC, so it's a column. So I'll get rid of the C, so it just becomes the field color itself. So I'll okay that. Refresh my report. And you can see now that the text color itself has now become that rather than the background of it. It's a bit wishy-washy. So use it and just be aware of the context around how you can actually see that, especially if you've got some row colors that are coming there in behind it. It's much better if it becomes a column color in itself to make it a little bit more bolder, but it's just being aware of that you can change the color of the text as well in relation to that. Okay, so next, so we've looked at a web report, how we can modify the data or add fields to it. We've looked about adding colors. If we wanted to do colors, we've looked about adding colors to numbers. We've looked about adding colors to columns and to rows and to individual fields themselves. What about at the bottom of a report where there are totals? How does all that stuff actually work, and how do we actually get that to show? So if I choose a report that does have some totals, so if I go to my client history report as an example. Okay, so here we are, we have a report that has some totals that are showing down the bottom. What I've changed with this report just initially is to give you a page total, so what's displaying on the screen, and to give you an overall report total. So the report total is the value of the overall report with all pages actually showing. So if I go to the next page, you can see in there that the page total is that the report total is $81,000, which it should say. If I go to the first page, it's $81,000, but on the first page there was $125,000 showing, and on the second page there was negative $44,000 showing because of that row there. Couple of caveats to be aware of. If you've got page totals and report totals, it can be a processing overhead depending if you have a lot of pages or a lot of page or a large pages of information showing, and it has to go through and calculate what that is, add it to make it in the first page, and add it all up. So there are some combinations. There are some ways that we can sort of optimize that a little bit in the report to make that work. And I just wanted to show you how that functions in the system. So if I go to my web reports, we want to call up, that was my client history report. So if I open that, you will see in this report, in the report setup area, I just want to bring your attention to a couple of things here. The page size to view the report. In the example that I gave you, I actually just wanted to make sure that I had multiple pages. So I did actually change the page size to only displaying 50 rows of information at a given time. So in the report setup, I can change that under report setup details, and I can change it where it says view report, and I said, just show me the first 50 lines. So that's a page size. And then within that, I said at the top here, in the totaling behavior, I want to see the page and the report totals. I can then choose to, if I want to, I can change this so it shows the report only. So if I just go apply and refresh, it'll show the overall report totals as the overall balance at the bottom of the report. Other options that we had, I just bring that up again, is the fact that you could just, if it was only one page only, it'll show a total. So let's just see what that looks like. So you notice here in the case of this, because I've got more than 50, it's got 68 items, I've got it set to being 50 as the page size. So it's only going to fit there. It's not giving me a total at all. Let's see if I can change the page size here. So change the page size or default page size to being larger than that, so 100. So the 68 actually fitted in there, and then it will actually give me the overall total. So so you can get some options that are around there, and it's all about seeing what you want to see. So you want to see a report total, or you want to see a page total, or just being aware of the fact too, just if you've got multiple pages, hundreds and hundreds of pages, it can be an overhead, and that you may have a wee think about how you set that up. So just wanted to let you know that that was available. Now, also, just the last little part to add to that puzzle is how did the report know that those fields were to be totals? So, okay, so in here we've got the amount field. There is a column that says total, and in here it says, is it going to produce a total, yes or no? So for anything that's a money field or some sort of a decimal or some sort of a number field, you can go yes or no for it to show the total at the bottom of the report. So you can make those modifications and have a bit of a play around with that yourself. So as I always say, so if you make any changes, always make it in the test system first so that you don't affect your live system. And I will show you towards the end of this in the next few minutes about how you can actually export and import that data into your live system. So any changes that you make and you get this looking the way that you want it to look, you don't have to repeat it in your live system. It's just a simple export and import to make all that work. Now, if I then also bring all that together. So we've then looked at from a totaling perspective. If we look at the reports, the fields that are showing down the bottom here in the report, we saw before that I could change the page size. What it has here as well is it also has a box that says auto size the column. So if you've never seen that, clicking on auto size will say, I will resize all these columns based upon what's in the content showing on the screen right now. And oh, yes, tick box, do you want me to include the header in resizing those to resize that field? So if I go yes, what it does is it says, okay, I'm looking at the size of your header, and I will basically say, oh, because of the amount field, I will pull all that stuff together to give you more screen space, so you can see what you actually need to see on that screen. When you're looking at numbers, though, and you've got overall totals, the thing you have to be aware of is if you see down the bottom, it's now kind of truncated that overall amount total. It's got 3 dots, which just means there's more to it. So if I was to grab that field, and just make it wider, you can see now that that's available and presenting correctly at the bottom of the screen. If also you wanted to, just by default, if I go back to my client history report and edit the report itself, there is another part to this where you can also, if you wanted to, you can change the overall size of that column. So here we've got, the fields, and it's saying what is the width. So if that amount, it wasn't wide enough and I wanted it to be 100, I could change that to being 100. So it always showed, if I've got large numeric figures, it can always show that. Also, just really quickly, just beside it, it has an alignment column. So whether it's aligning to the center of the field or to the left or to the right, you can change that sort of thing as well. Okay, so just to show you, if I don't include the headers and the auto size calculation, so if I go yes, obviously there are fields here that has data which is smaller than what the headers are, so you can see that it's basically pulled it all together and kind of made a little bit of a mess of it. So it's just aware of your auto size, and it's possibly a good idea to include the headers in that resizing of the screen. Now the grid style. While we're doing that, you may not have noticed that there is a spaced grid style. If you wanted to sort of space it out a little bit, the actual look of it gets a little bit bigger. It's kind of a little bit easier to see that you can do that. And you can also there's a version of it where it basically tries to make things a little bit more tighter and a little bit more data is actually displaying on the screen. So you can see a version of that as well. Otherwise, the normal default is default. Takes it back to the way that it looks. Okay, right. One other thing that I want to show you next is that we've made all these changes to reports. If we've gone through and we've done all sorts of weird and wonderful things, we've changed the way the layout of the report looks, we've changed things about it, and we've done it in our test system, and we want to be able to export that into our live system. How does that work? So in our test system here, in the web report admin, you can see here is a header link on the right hand side. There is an export report utility header link. If I click on that, that will bring me up a screen. If I drag that across, that'll bring me up a screen that I can say, okay, what's the report that I'm wanting to export? I can look through and see it's my one that says my client history report. Once I click on it, it's got an option here where it's got a box that says export to an XML text file. So this is the box that you click on to allow it to export. So clicking on this will basically export it to a location where I'd want to save it. And just another thing just to be aware of, if you are to export this, be aware of that there's these other options down below. So if you made changes to the columns or to the view, so that view that says what data am I pulling into my report, if you'd updated that and added an additional column, that won't be in your live system. So if you just exported your report, brought it back into your live system, it won't have that. So the report might do some funny things because that field's not available. If you click on that report views or select all, that's the safest way, or actually not select all, but report view, and you go export, it'll also export those things relating to it at the same time. Which is useful to know. So the view that relates to the report will get exported at the same time, so that when you import it into your live system, so this is what you do when you go into your live system, you go to the same place, so that web report admin, there's a wee button that says import. You click on the import button, it asks you where is the file coming from, and it will go away and update that back into your live system. And that's nice and simple and easy. Okay. All right, I think everyone will be pleased that I've this time followed my time limits, and I'm within the realms of where I should be getting close to finishing. So there's been some questions perhaps, Lauren, that sort of come in during the course of the discussion so far. Is there anything that that we want to bring up or that somebody wants to ask?
Hi Blair, thank you. Yeah, Duncan's just said something about the Theodore address. We'll get back to you about that one, Duncan. We'll have a little play and just make sure that was on the right in the beginning. We've also had a question saying, if you change the report colors, I assume that will make these changes for all users.
Yes, that's correct. So the report colors is because we change it in this area here. The report colors are actually changed within the Nimbus web reporter. Once that pops up, and we save that, that's applicable to everybody. So that's not just applicable to an individual; it's applicable to everybody in the organization.
Well, that's all the questions for now, unless anyone else has got anything to add. Did you have anything else to go through, Blair, or was that on your list?
Yeah, I think the main thing sort of to try to bring in with this whole webinar is around reports is about there's a whole lot of functionality about where the data is coming from, what it looks like, how it all is displayed, and basically, you know, it's your imagination how this actually works. So if after this webinar you say, hey, look, I've been inspired by this webinar, I want to do all these different reports, or I want to sort of get some things in place, you may come back to us as Nimbus consultants and say, hey, here's a layout for a report that I want to do. I just recommend somebody mock something up in Excel, or they draw it on a piece of paper, they do a layout of how it actually looks. We can do the basics for you if you want. We can make sure all the fields are there that you want. We can give you the report, and now you can go in and do, you know, the fine tuning. You can add the colors to it. You can change where the fields are. You can do other things to it to make it your own and your own business. So we're not saying, you know, Nimbus has to do all the reports and everything for you. We're saying, hey, look, we can do the structure of it. We can do the content of where the fields and the data is coming from, and allow you to populate and to do the rest of the stuff in the report that you want to do. If you're interested in doing that, I guess it really depends how much time that you've got on your hands, and whether that's something that you're interested in doing. You know, like I said, all the Nimbus consultants are very skilled in doing this and can easily create reports for you if you require.
Yes, that's great. I think, as Blair said, it's just a really good starting point to maybe get everyone's minds thinking and realizing, you know, what you can get out of your reports from Nimbus, and just like you said, get creative, have a think, make them work for you, and we can help you make them work for you, and just make it a really good tool of a system that you already have access to. So yeah, that's fantastic.
Just want to check too. So just from the first webinar, we had this hints and tips. This got emailed out to a lot of people. If you haven't got it, let us know. It's about filtering on the web reports, different commands that you can use to do different filtering. That's available too from us, and we can send that out to you if you haven't already seen that, which is a handy thing to have.
Very good. Cool. Okay, great. Well, I think we've reports 1 and reports 2, we've hopefully given everyone a lot of food for thought. If you have any questions, then obviously come back to us and stuff. But I might have one more question coming through before we let you go. But otherwise, we do thank you all for coming and taking the time. Yes, I'll send that through to you. And we will have another webinar coming up later this month again. So keep an eye on your emails and your send outs. We'll also obviously have this recording available, as Blair said, so you can go and have a look at it and stuff. So we'll get all that information to you guys. If anyone isn't signed up for our website, just send us an email. I'm sorry, our newsletter, send us an email. We can sign you up, or you can pop on our website and also sign yourself up on there and stuff. So that's great. But thank you very much for coming, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.